in undergrad, making a decision to go into education was a very big decision. Like I didn't have to. Like I had 5 different corporate job offers. One as high as $60K with a $10K sign-in bonus, and I took a job making less than half that. So with no sign-in bonus, right? So that was a really important decision. But I think how I kind of a model that I've lived by when it comes to my life thus far is chase the vision and not the money, and the money will end up chasing you.
Who we choose to do work for, who we choose to service can completely change our character and how we see life. Who we decide to keep in our support system, whether it be friends or family, completely impacts our emotional, spiritual, and mental wellness. And I think it's important that while there are people like yourself who we can admire and we can look up to, it's still good to know what decisions did you have to make in order for you to be you. The community you're impacting, through words at least, is Black men and boys. But to your point, although the messaging is directly targeted at that group, there's a lot of other people, communities, and entities that care about that same population. So while me being Jerlisa doesn't identify as a Black man, I am indeed a woman. It is true that if somebody asks me who or what do I care about when it comes to my community, there is no doubt that Black men and boys, adolescents, etc., are indeed a part of that list, which now means that as a Black woman, I identify with the messaging of the Black man can, because it's a population of people who are impacted by that business that I care about. And for that reason, that's where my involvement comes from.
What's going on, everyone? It's your favorite founder and host, Jerlisa Juju Fontaine. I'm a proud product manager turned digital media entrepreneur and community builder with a passion for all things business, innovation, productivity, and of course, digital health. I'm on a life mission to create a world where people can live healthier and financially fulfilling lives, all whilst doing the work that they love. So how does this podcast fit into that? Step into the world of the Very Necessary Decisions podcast, where I interview industry experts, thought leaders, and change makers on the very necessary decisions that they had to make for the sake of their accelerated business and career growth. We take deep dives into their innovative strategies, business models, and more. And don't worry, we aren't sticklers on this side. We make these conversations informative, yet fun and chill. Take a listen.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Very Necessary Decisions podcast. Today I have somebody here with me who is going to cover a topic that we actually haven't covered before on this podcast. So when I think about the people that we've had on this podcast, we've had people who have, let's say, survey businesses or creative agencies or career platforms or product-based businesses. People who have done all kinds of things. But what we haven't had is someone who can genuinely speak to what I consider to be the social impact space, building in the space of education, building in the space of wellness, and building in the space of nonprofit work. And for that reason, I have brought to you all today Dr. Brandon Frame. Okay, nah, you're mad funny. So for those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Frame, he is a man of many titles. And if you follow him on social media, which you should see in the description below, when I think of him, like I said before, an educator, professor, somebody who thoroughly and genuinely promotes wellness, but especially wellness in the, I guess you could say for Black men, a social impact leader, and someone who I would also consider to be a visionary, and not just a visionary in terms of the actual work that he's doing right now, but for anybody who's paying attention, you don't even have to ask what his goal is for like the next 1 to 3 years. You can genuinely see that he's building a platform that's supposed to actually impact generations to come, generations that we won't even live to see. And if you don't see that in his work, we could fight. But I don't fight. I'm a good girl. So with that being said, I could brag about this man all day because I met him at an event some time ago. Shout outs to PVO, Positive Vibes Only. And I was just really impressed with his demeanor, the way he carries himself, how humble he is. Humble yet confident. Humble not meaning that he doesn't know what he's about and how great he is, but humble enough to be able to receive the compliment, receive positivity in the work that he does, but also spit it back out to you and try his best to get to know you and what you do. So I do want to say shout outs to you, Brandon, for that one, because you really are a dope soul. But once again, I'm going to shut up because I can go on all day. Dr. Frame, Brandon, I'll call you a million things throughout this podcast. Tell the folks who you are and what it is that you do.
Doc, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here to share just some words and hopefully a few gems. Who am I? Again, Dr. Brandon Frame, a role model, a scholar, a gentleman, founder of the Black Man Can, a Renaissance man with a social conscience and a global perspective. Also just a vessel for the Lord. I think that ideas of spiritual children seated by God inside of us, and God just be giving me tons of spiritual children, and then I use the tools and the people around me to manifest those ideas into reality, to create impact, to leave a legacy, and to just continue to be a vessel for him and what he wants to see happen in the world, and me try to execute that in the best way possible.
That was a fire intro. First of all, once again, a man of many titles, because even though I felt like I did a good job describing who he is, he just introduced a whole bunch of other titles like Renaissance man and whatnot. And we just love to see it. But yes, indeed, he is all of those things. And I do want to even chime in there really quickly for you to kind of give us more insight into like your career background. Like when I think of you, I think educator, like I mentioned before. I think wellness enthusiast. I think community leader. But what I want to get more, I guess, more clarity in is, do you identify with those titles and more? And what even kicked off your work in this space?
Yeah, I do identify with those titles, and I think about at what point do I want to tell this story, to answer your question. But I would say, if I had to pick a point, we'll start with college. I was a business major in college. If you ask me in '05, '06, I'm like, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder, go work in marketing and work my way to the top, if you will, to be like a chief marketing officer, right? That's like my general idea. While I was a student at the Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, I started a mentoring program, and starting that mentoring program, I realized that I had this really passion and purpose to be in education and youth development. And so upon graduation, I turned down all my corporate job offers and took a teaching job at the Fessenden School in West Newton, Massachusetts, where I taught. It was a boarding school. So I did what they call the triple threat, where you teach, live, and coach at the school. Then from there, I had the opportunity to become the director of business partnerships and development at High School Inc., which was an insurance and finance themed high school, working under my mentor, Dr. Terrell Hill. And then from there, was recruited to I moved to New York City. Was recruited to work at the Urban Assembly, where I was a senior director of social emotional learning, and then most recently left that role to pursue entrepreneurship full time and continue to build the Black Man Can, which I started in 2010. So I've been doing that for 14 years now, but now fully doing it where I wake up every day thinking about how can I grow, evolve, and scale the Black Man Can to create the impact that's needed in the world on behalf of Black men and boys.
Okay, so I have to do something real quick. Let me see. Hold on. I want to put it in perspective for them. Hold on. Let me go to the page. Okay. All right, y'all. So I'm on the Black Man Can page on Instagram. A lot of people will start, let's say, a project before we even call it a business. They'll start a project and they will say, okay, you know what? I care about a subject matter and I'm going to use social media to just kick it off and see if people are attracted to the narrative of the brand I'm creating, even before, like I said, before starting it as a business. To put it in perspective, Brandon, or AKA Dr. Frame, has been working on the Black Man Can for the past 14 years. And this page now has 1.1 million followers. So this just goes to show people who are listening, stop trying to, I guess you could say, be overcritical of the progress that you're making in your brand and or your business. keep seeing it through if it's something you genuinely care about, because it will be a culture staple, a community staple, a social media page staple. It could be all of those things if you see it through. And this is something that Dr. Frame was able to create over the course of the past 14 years. So I just go back to the page real quick to put that in perspective, because 1.1 million is no easy feat. Like, I want that for my business page. I want that for my personal too. Shit, how do I get?
I
Matter of
mean,
fact, hold on, let's talk about it.
I think it's interesting. Social media is a tool. Social media is important. It adds for marketing and stuff like that, brand awareness.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm being quite honest about what we do, and there's multiple layers, we'll probably get into like the
Mm-hmm.
business aspect of how the business is broken down and whatnot. But what generates the most revenue, what people give us money for is you wouldn't even that doesn't even show up on the page, right? So
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
like I think that that's the thing that's really interesting that maybe I don't talk about. Like I don't really get on, I don't make videos about like
Talk about
here
it now.
1 million followers, all that kind of stuff. So it's just that like we bring in donations and we get grants, and it has nothing to do with like that's not even a part of our grant proposal. It's like, oh, social media and everything. So I think you can use it to tell a story, you can use it for brand awareness, but people don't even most people don't even know that the Black Man Can's a nonprofit, right? Most
Mm.
people think it's just an Instagram page. There's more we could do on our end that could help us if we told that story better. But again, there's multiple things that we do and areas that we impact that having a social media file doesn't mean anything. And so I think it's just important to think about depending on what you're trying to do. And I think what's also important is you just have to run your own race. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just me. I don't really I look at what other people are doing to learn as I watch people do things, but not for like competition or comparison. I'm like, all right, that's dope, but I'm like, oh, I can see I can sometimes look at something and see the vision of what somebody's trying to do and be like, that's really interesting and that's innovative, that's unique, and thinking about, okay, let me look into this a little more. Maybe that's a way or a process that might be beneficial for me to use if I'm trying to reach if I have a certain project or something that I'm working on. So that's all I think. Again, people see like some people interact, right? You could go on right now and look from your personal page and look at the Black Man Can, and you're gonna see all these people who follow the Black Man Can that I don't know any of those people, which is really dope and really cool and important. And again, it helps with like brand awareness. But again, some of the things that we do, some of the work that we do, like we can't even post about it. Like it's not even
Yeah.
something that's like, oh, here's something that we did. We might be able to post aspects of it, but you wouldn't know, like, oh wow, you guys do that? Yeah, we do that. So
So I'm going to come in here real quick and say that there's a lot of mystery in the context that you just gave. So we're going to demystify everything you just said. So what that means is, okay, thinking back to your journey from college, right? I want to bucket this out for everybody who's listening once again. You have Brandon, this educator, professor, teacher, right? Your first job out of college was indeed being a boarding school educator. Then you have this guy who was also this mental health or mental wellness or just wellness overall enthusiast. And then you have this third bucket who is the man, the business, the founder, the CEO of this entity called the Black Man Can. And when I think about what conjoins those three buckets of identities, I think about the fact that a lot of people sleep on the fact that people were really student leaders who found their passion during college or maybe had it before, but college gave them a platform and they were able to take that experience and turn it into something in real life that can have longevity and that can have real world impact. And that obviously thus brought you to the fact that you now own this company. So I want to explore a little bit more about like Brandon, the founder of the Black Man Can, and demystify everything you just said by asking you, what exactly is the Black Man Can? What are all of your offerings? What is it this we do but nobody knows? What is it?
um, the Black Man Can is a nonprofit focused on creating and amplifying programs, content, events that show what Black men and boys can do. We are broken into a few different ways. So one, we have programs in schools. So that's kind of broken down. One, we do work in juvenile justice. So we have programs in juvenile facilities where we're working with young men who are incarcerated and preparing them with the skills and knowledge in various areas so that when they are out and they get released, they're able to, be the upstanding men that they truly aspire to be. Then we also do work in the K through 12 space in terms of programming in schools. Really, we're focused on grades 3 through 12 with a primary focus on grades 3 through 5. So we provide lots of programming for our young kings who are third, fourth, and fifth grade. And giving them the skills and knowledge, specifically the social emotional skills that allow for them to be successful in middle school, high school, and as they and into adulthood. And then there's the media side of the business where we create content, we amplify content, we work with brands to create content that centers Black men in a positive light.
Fire. Okay. So a couple of things come to mind. I was listening to either Angela Yee's show or a Breakfast Club interview. It was one of the two, and Mayor Adams was on it. For those who don't know, Mayor Adams is Mayor Eric Adams. He's the mayor of New York City. And I remember he was having a conversation about basically providing funding to companies that have programs that solve some kind of issues for those who are in the prison system. So going back to a comment you made earlier about receiving grants, is this an example of a type of grant that someone someone in your position could receive to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so there's grant funding that you can receive. There's federal or state funding, public dollars, taxpayer dollars to do some of the work. Then there's donations that can come in from people, and there's also fee for service that the entity that you're going to, whether it's a school or a department of corrections or whomever, is paying you to perform a service. So all these different ways are ways to receive funding to do your work.
Okay, so we're gonna go a little deeper. We're gonna go a little deeper. We're exploring the business of nonprofit world now. Okay, cool. So now we know that we're able to leverage the resources that the state, local, or federal government can provide to organizations like yours. But how do people who have no political ties, no government ties, even find access to this information about grants?
I think one, most, especially if it's like public grant, is usually you can find it on particular websites for federal and state grants that are out there. Different RFPs come out as well. It's also building relationships with foundations and like getting different meetings, going to different events, going to conferences and presenting. All these different ways are how you get yourself out there, as well as build relationships with different people. And sometimes it just takes a while, right? Like it's an initial conversation. I also go on LinkedIn and I look up grant managers and program managers at different foundations, send them a LinkedIn message, and then ask for a meeting. I always ask people for no more than 30 minutes. Most people have at some point 30 minutes within a 2 week period to sit with you and hear what you have to say about a particular thing. Or share what you're doing. It's important to know what their grant strategy is, or like sometimes I'm talking to some foundations, but I'm not talking about our media work. I'm just talking about juvenile justice because that's what they care about. That's what they fund. So that's important. I think another thing that's really important as you're building your nonprofit is a lot of times you don't want to just really go for the smaller grants. You do want to go for the smaller grants, but you need larger grants, 6-figure grants in order to really do the work, pay FTEs and whatnot. And so one thing that's really important is to one, do your program. Like you will probably have to invest some money into your program that you're trying to create or the impact you're trying to do, and make sure that you collect data on what you've done. Because a lot of foundations do not want to fund your operational budget. So they don't want to give you money so that you are paying your bills just so the organization can run. You want to be able to build in a way that when you go to the foundation, they're literally funding the program that maybe you've already started and had impact, but you want to scale that. You want to create deeper impact. You want to evolve it. And so they're like, oh, I see where this innovation is. So now I'm going to fund that, with the idea that when we fund it, ideally, this is something that won't need grant funds maybe in the near future, potentially, right? Because we see that it has the potential to be a revenue generating um, program in some way, shape, or form, right? That's just depending on what you're offering and what you're doing. So I think, I think that's really big to just know is that whatever you do, you want to collect data on it, and then be able to share with foundation around here's the work that we did, here's the impact that we make, here's what we want to scale this program to create more impact, and we would love your contribution to make that happen.
So I want to highlight a comment you just made, right? About generating revenue. When people think about nonprofits, they usually think about how they can just ask people for money to run it. But to your point, a lot of times people are more willing to give your organization money if they can see that you have a model in place for you to also generate your own source of revenue, that you have the ability to create ways for money to come into the business and sustain itself. They're hopefully just funding something to grow, scale, be amplified, or whatever the case may be. So for everybody who's listening, if you're building something in the nonprofit space and you realize that seeking funding is something you're very much so interested in, there might be a reality where you'll have to determine what is it that my organization can do as a product or as a service so that it is indeed attracting money, so that people know that when they invest by giving, that it's not just going to end with that. You have your own way of constantly bringing money into the door as well. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. You want to have a whole approach of here's what your money goes towards and the impact that it makes. You have your annual report, you have your annual gala that people get to come and hear the stories. Sending out impact reports is really important. So just people know, like, people do want to give, but they do want to give to the right things. They want to give to things that they know are making impact in the community or impacting the things that they care about. Another thing is not everybody cares about your cause. I think
Yeah.
that's really important, right? So like mine is black men and boys. There might be some people who are like, that's not what I want to give my money to. I want to give it to black girls. I want to give it to STEM. I want to give it to um, whatever it may be, right? So there's all these different people and organizations doing phenomenal work. And so you just want to identify people who want to give to what you want to do, or you can also ask for smaller amounts. Again, you want to think about also how do you get to high net worth individuals. High net worth individuals also want to give money, but they just want to give to the right things. And how do you position your the work that you're doing in a way that is attractive to them, or they see the impact that they can make, because people constantly foundations, high net worth individuals, they get people hit them up every day. Hey, I need money for this, I need money for that. Some really good advice that was just given to me that I'll share here on the podcast that I think is important as you're making very necessary decisions, is that if you ask for money, you usually get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get money. And so that's just something to think about. So as you're building and what you're doing is thinking about how could you apply that principle to building um, your nonprofit organization.
Fire, bodied, love it. Okay, so now we spoke about one way of, I guess you could say, generating revenue for your business, which is like seeking the grant funding, seeking donations from high income earners, or maybe those who aren't as high income, but they have money to give. Why? Because they just like to give. But then I think about this other source where you mentioned that programmatically you're getting like these grants for your programs, your initiatives, etc. But I've also seen that you were able to partner either with like Walmart or Target or etc., right? So what are you doing with these bigger businesses that make them feel comfortable paying you to attach their name to your brand?
I think when it comes to, we were able to do a really amazing Father's Day campaign with Walmart. It went really well. And it's really pitching, here's the idea or concept. Sometimes you're working in with like, here's the thing we're trying to do. How could you help us amplify and elevate it as a organization? And so they share with us, we're trying to do this Father's Day campaign, the League of Black and Unlimited Dads. And so just this whole, campaign that we can do and how we can create and amplify this thing for the month of June. It went really well, and part of that is just a few things happen there. One is you just kind of beating the pavement, if you will, and building relationships. That's important. And two, we have reinvested in what our website looked like and multiple things so that we could offer up like a full realm of like, okay, if you work with us, we can do editorial, we can do digital, we can do social, we can do co-branded merch, we can do mailings, right? So put this all together. So now it's not just fund my event,
Yeah.
or this one thing. It's like, no, we can, over the course of a whole month, we can do all these different things, and we can host an event which gives you product placement, right? So I think, it's being very flexible in terms of being able to pitch people on things that, one, elevate what their KPIs are and will allow for them to hit their numbers, but also give them access to people, places that allows for them to get just a little bit more credibility with a group of people because those people really believe in your brand and your product.
That was fire. I'll also say this too, right? Like listening to everything you're saying and just thinking about business in general, I think that the reason why a company or organization like yours is even capable of being able to, I guess, offer so many different things is because I think that who you're targeting or AKA who you're impacting is very clear. Like if anybody is looking to do any work in the world of Black men and boys, they at least know that the Black man can has that brand, that niche, that community on lock. And whether it's you trying to creatively find ways to collaborate with these businesses or entities to do something for that niche, or the vice versa, where they're just looking for something or someone like you and your entity to do that, at least that communicated line is clear and you're the go to. So, do you think that acknowledging that for anybody who's creating a nonprofit, yes, you may want to offer a service. Yes, you may want to create a product. Yes, you have a business. But is it safe to say that at minimum, being very clear in who you want to impact can open a lot of doors for you?
Yeah, I would say that that's very important. I would think about also the byproduct of that, right? So, who are you? Can you impact by focusing on this group? So, for example, some of the conversations we are currently having in a big project that we're about to undergo is when by investing in Black men and boys, you you reach a target demographic of Black women, because if you were to ask Black women five things that they care about, many women would probably mention Black men in the five things that they like really really care about in terms of like change, impact, right? So the brands that actually take a time to fully invest in working with this niche population, you actually reach another population because they care about it. They have Black boys who they want to become Black men. They know that those Black boys need to see positive images of Black men, and so whoever takes a chance to invest in that in a very deep and meaningful way is a brand that people are going to have a favorable opinion of, because now when I think of positive images of Black men and boys and what I want my son to see, and what I know my husband to be, what I know my uncle to be, they fund opportunities that depict that to be the case. So we're working on a big project that we're undergoing is creating a report, if you will, that shows what happens and what will be the impact by fully deepening impact into Black men and boys, and what and how many people feel about that and what that could mean for someone's brand.
I like how you said that, right? Because to your point, once again, the community you're impacting through words at least is Black men and boys. But to your point, although the messaging is directly targeted at that group, there's a lot of other people, communities, and entities that care about that same population. So while me being Jerlisa doesn't identify as a Black man, I am indeed a woman. It is true that if somebody asks me, who or what do I care about when it comes to my community, there is no doubt that Black men and boys, adolescents, etc., are indeed a part of that list, which now means that as a Black woman, I identify with the messaging of the Black Man Can because it's a population of people who are impacted by that business that I care about. And for that reason, that's where my involvement comes from. So sometimes for everybody who's listening, when you're creating something, you may know who you wanted to impact, but you don't have to identify as that thing to feel, or that person to feel involved in supporting or benefiting from it. Because the reality is, it might actually still be for you. It doesn't say it in those words as it describing you, but you know that whether it's through your heart, your mind, or your pockets, it's something that you need to be involved with. I would even extend that to say that once again, like, you made that point about like seeking, not seeking, but like people who are high income earners, like they are typically philanthropists, sometimes for genuine reasons, sometimes because if they don't do it, the government's going to take it anyway, so they might as well. But there are people who honestly are like, like your typical regular middle income people who want to know what it feels like to be giving, who want to be philanthropists, who want to do something or participate in something. And I feel like something as simple as, once again, like as Brandon mentioned, like your social media page isn't the business, it's the brand. But sometimes it's enough to make people see it as something interesting enough to support, give back to, or whatever the case may be. So once again, like Brandon, you're doing the Lord's work. You're locked in. That's great. Now, I want to switch gear just a little bit, but not too much. We spent a lot of time talking about generating revenue as a nonprofit, where you can get this money from, who a nonprofit can impact. But I want to talk about business structure. So when someone wakes up in the morning and they have this brilliant genius idea to create something, they typically have an option of creating a nonprofit or a for-profit business. Why did the Black Man Can have to be a nonprofit? Why did you go that route instead of it being an LLC, a C corp, S corp, whatever the case may be? Or maybe you have an entity that's a mixture of both. I don't know.
So the Black Man Can, the story of the evolution of the Black Man Can starts again in 2010. So all I did was just start a blog. So the Black Man Can started as a blog, and then by 2013, we made it an LLC. Just because we were charging for a few things and needed to have to be a business. And then when we launched the Building a Better Brother Summit, which is a summit that we take to different cities, it people were like, "Oh, I want to donate to the work that you're doing." So then it was like, "Oh, we should transition to a nonprofit," because people wanted to donate to the organization, and then that's how we got to the nonprofit piece. I think again, when you think about starting a business, all 501c3 means is just the structure of the business. In this structure of this business, you can receive donations from individuals, and you can give them a letter that they're allowed to use their donation as a tax write-off. Outside of that, it doesn't really look any different than other businesses, in terms of like, oh yeah, people can pay us to do something, like no problem there. We our merchandise, we don't have it under the Black Man Can, we have it under a different business, just because it gets really, it can, there is a tax piece. You want to have an accountant. As a nonprofit, there's two different tax forms. If you under 50K, then that's one tax form. It's real simple, easy to do. Once you go over 50K, it gets more complex as you go. But nothing wrong. But it's just good to have an accountant to reconcile your books when it comes to all of those things. And Yeah, so that's kind of like the journey of the Black Men Can. Like it became just because people wanted to donate to what we were doing, and I was like, oh, I can't. I want to be able to give people that tax write off. So we structured it as a 501c3 organization, and I've been operating in that capacity since about 2016, 2017.
So it's safe to say that because the brand itself has, or you, just let's say you as a brand yourself, has so many different offerings in this space, there is the nonprofit and there are other endeavors that you have that may not be a nonprofit, but you're also providing services, selling products, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. We have, like I said, we have the e-commerce business, and like, and that's a separate business, but has the license to sell merchandise from the Black Men Can because the Black Men Can is trademarked.
Talk about trademarking. Why did you have to trademark?
Just because people will take your shit.
Talk about it.
So like I mean, I personally don't. I think if somebody were to create another version of the Black Man Can, that's cool. I think you have McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, etc. They're all fast food restaurants that do something different. So I don't have a problem with somebody looking at it and be like, all right, I want to create the same thing and just call it something different. That's all. But I think when people see something and like, oh, I see this. I see what they're doing. That's working. Okay, I want to create my version of it. Cool. Like, as long as you don't call it the same thing, I don't. I personally don't see things as like stealing or whatever. It's like, oh, you were a pioneer, a trendsetter, and then somebody else is like, yo, this is my spin that I'm putting on the thing. So that's just a personal outlook on it. Everybody doesn't necessarily share my viewpoint in that way, but that's okay. It's just how I look at it. Like I see people do something all the time. I'm like, all right, I like that. I'm about to put my own razzle dazzle on it, and then do it. So
I mean, I think the reality is that people in the business world probably say like, is an idea like really that new, or is it just more so the execution style? Like somebody might verbally say, hey, I want to do something in the Black community or the male community, the woman community, whatever it is. But while you can like verbally just state what it is or who you want to impact, it's a different level. It's a different version when you're executing in a way that people can actually, I guess, relate to, vibe with, or see themselves being tied to that thing. And I think that, to your point, not feeling the need to be selfish when it comes to the identity of being a Black man or wellness, and other people being able to have their own pages and their own version of a similar business, and you not seeing it as competition, you seeing it as everybody just kind of solving problems in the same space in their own way. But at least individually for you and your team and what you're building, it's thriving. So there's no reason to have beef. Just don't use my exact name because it's trademarked. So you got to pay me for that. Is that fair?
yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Cool. All right. So as we wrap up the conversation about like Brandon being the founder, because I have this thing at the end of my interviews, and it's called like, I actually really don't have a name for it. I just internally call it like the random lifestyle, God knows what flash round. So we're gonna get there in a second. But I just have like two quick questions for you. And I say quick, but it might not be that quick. I don't know. Depends on your answer. But you kind of hinted at a question that I had to ask you anyway, and you mentioned about this thing called making very necessary decisions. So in light of being this man, black male wellness, professor, educator, etc., founder, what was a very necessary decision that you had to make in your career in order to see this level of growth that you have now experienced?
I think there's a few different points that I could point to. I think that were one. I think
Decisions that we make are what's responsible for the pivot in our growth. Who we decide to partner with completely can change the trajectory of our character and our business. Who we choose to do work for, who we choose to service, can completely change our character and how we see life. Who we decide to keep in our support system, whether it be friends or family, completely impacts our emotional, spiritual, and mental wellness. And I think it's important that while there are people like yourself who we can admire and we can look up to, it's still good to know what decisions did you have to make in order for you to be you, so that although I may not be exactly like you, you're someone who inspires me, I look up to. At least I know these are the things that you had to do to get to where you are, and I should probably consider and listen to those things as a part of my journey. And that's why I feel like that question is so important to ask. And I felt like that was the necessary name for the podcast. So you answered that flawlessly, and you gave us multiple examples. And I feel like for people who are listening, they can resonate with probably every single one of the examples you made. I even made a little micro clip on Instagram basically saying how I wanted to go to med school. My goal was to be a doctor, an OBGYN. And I had to quickly realize after I graduated, like, my sanity is not built for only doing one thing. I can't go to med school and only study textbooks and just do that. If I really want to, I think I can, but I just don't feel like that's what I want to do. And when I thought about my overall goal and vision for life, I had to realize that I can do that thing in many different ways. It doesn't have to be as a clinical professional. So I had to realize that this job that I took that was temporary, and literally to your point, I've got offers to do things outside of medicine and healthcare because people saw me as a business person before I saw me as a business person. And I said no to every single one of them. I said, no, 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 no. Don't distract me. I'm going to do this $45,000 nonprofit job that's really shit pay because I want to work with students and give back to the world before I go into med school. And while I don't regret it, that clearly didn't become the best decision because I didn't pursue medicine, but it became the best decision because working that job and being in the real world reminded me that I am ready to just keep staying in this world, and I don't think that going back to school for that long at least was for me. So that's why I had to just say, like, why do you make the decisions you make, and why is it so important? And now we know. But I do have one more question before I go into my flash round, which is going back into the key thing that you care about most outside of your friends and family, key, is 2024. Black people on a whole have gone through a lot and still go through a lot, but Black men in particular go through what they go through. And I'm curious to know, as of 2024, how would you define the state of Black male wellness? Hmm.
This is a wonderful question because it's the state is ever evolving. Because if we look at 2024 and look at, let's take the millennial generation, right? Let's go with millennials. And if you, there's no right now something that quantifies this, but so many men are in a better place than the previous generation, right? There's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of men who are and who are taking what their fathers did or did not give them and being amazing fathers, right? More than that previous, they're more present, they're more active, right? And there's data to support this, right? More men are going to therapy, more men are talking about it, more men are taking the time to be better for themselves, their families, and their communities. Simultaneously, there's still a lot that we need to reach. It's kind of like in Murder to Excellence when Jay-Z was like, yeah, you got me, Kanye, LeBron, but we need a million more, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yep.
there's so many black men and men that I can point out to, and that's what the Black Man Can't represents in terms of telling that story. And simultaneously, there's so many more we still need to reach, so much more work that needs to be done. The work is vast, and sometimes there's not as many laborers as there are as the work that needs to get done. And we have to continue to create the space for black men to be able to heal, to be able to work through their challenges. Because when we do that, we create more soldiers that can go out and not only impact their community, but be great men for their families. So I says like that's why it's hard to really give a one word. The word I would use like ever evolving,
Yeah.
because like I said, in 2024, men have made tremendous progress
Yeah.
if you just base it off generational change from like boomers to Gen X to millennial into Gen Z. Like you're like, wow, like, yep, there has been tremendous progress when you think about where some people, grandparents, grandfathers may have been in terms of how they saw the world and how they showed up, and then where we are now with men, and the growth that has taken place in between these different generations, there's just so much work left to do,
Yeah.
right? That it can look like nothing is happening. It can look like people will look at the news or something and be like, "Man, the world is going to shit," and it's not. I think that's also a piece as well as how and what we amplify, right? And that's why the Black Man Can, and that's one reason why I started it to begin with, is like these stories, these narratives are not necessarily told,
Yeah.
right? And what we amplify are the hot takes and the divisiveness and the salaciousness that exist, and then because it gets amplified so much, it seems as if that's what all black men are, or even all this is all what black women are, and they believe this, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
that's actually not true.
Mm-hmm.
The media that you're consuming is making you believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And how we can think about that is like there's a reason why people in the world see black people a particular ways, because the media perpetuated certain stereotypes and ways of thinking, thus people see it that way. So we're repeating that same cycle in many ways when we are promoting and amplifying wild crazy takes and content, when that's not the majority of people feel that way.
Bodied. That was great. I have nothing to say about that. That I'm done. That's all I have nothing to say. That was great. What I want to do now is I want to enter this last phase of the interview. It's called, once again, like my little flash round. Some of it pertains to what we've been discussing. Some of it is just really random. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Now, I think I know the answer to this because I saw something referenced in your bio about it. But what is your favorite genre of music?
I definitely. I mean, I think it's a mix. I'm reggae, dancehall, soca, hip hop, Afro beats, R&B. It's a little mix of all that in there, you know. So those always get me going and moving. So
Okay, cool, cool, cool. I said that because in your bio, I think I saw an initiative called like Hip Hop Ed or something like that. So I'm like, okay, hip hop might be one of those. Okay, cool. Now, my second question to you is a little bit more sentimental. And just like briefly, although you gave us like a suggestion earlier about like something you learned from a mentor, whoever you spoke to, about asking for advice and asking for money, but what advice would you give to those who are in their 20s?
people who are in their 20s, I will tell them, don't let social media rush you, and you can pray and see a therapist at the same time.
Okay, that was good. That was good. The best wellness tip you ever received.
Best wellness tip I ever received. Find out what you uh, find out what you like to do,
Mm-hmm.
and really embrace that. And sometimes what you like to do, what you're passionate about, and what you're good at, sometimes aren't the same thing,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yep. I like that. And I have one final question. You ready? I made this comment earlier about how I feel like someone who just knows you and sees your page, they might have an idea of what the answer to this question is. But I'll let you say it. What does the next 5 years for Dr. Frame and or the Black Man Can look like?
Next 5 years, the Black Man Can will continue to grow and to evolve into. I like to talk about it like it'll be like a heritage brand. So like you talk about the Urban League, you talk about NAACP and other organizations that are like staples. You also talk about the Black Man Can, in terms of the impact that we make in the world. So I'm excited to carry out that vision in terms of how we're going to impact, in various sectors, and continue to create content that tells amazing stories, and continue to build on being just a household name across the world in terms of impact. And when you think about black men and boys, it's synonymous with the Black Man Can.
That was amazing. So with that being said, all good things must come to an end. I think this interview was really amazing for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, people got to understand the various identities that you possess in terms of what you care about and what you do in this world and who you are. But then two, I think that also very importantly, people got to understand what does it look like to build out a nonprofit entity and even to an extent a for-profit entity. If you have an idea and you want to create some kind of legal structure around it, there's different ways to process and think through how you want to approach that. And you even mentioned also, by the way, like get an accountant, y'all. Stop thinking that you can keep your books by yourself. Maybe in the beginning of building your business you can, but there's probably going to be a point in time where you just really need your accountant to handle your books and really stay on that ASS to make sure that you are giving them everything they need so that they can properly communicate that to the IRS. Because the last entity that you want writing you, that's your accountant, but you is the IRS. Nobody wants to hear from them, not even Dr. Frame and not myself. But overall, if you're someone who just knows for sure that you're passionate about something and you all want to build in this nonprofit space, this interview definitely was for you. And I do hope that you all learn from it. Please look at the description below to follow Dr. Frame on all his platforms. That means his personal, and that also means his business platforms. And make sure that if there's some kind of listserv, which I'm pretty sure you have some kind of listserv or subscription or whatever it is, that you guys go to their website, subscribe. That way you can get all notifications and updates on what they have coming up, because that's very important. Did I miss anything, Brandon?
No, you got it. We in there.
All right. With that being said, I will see you all for the next episode. Bye, everyone.